Welcome back to the Workforce Workshop podcast. In this episode, we'll be talking about what is a contingent workforce. As business needs and demands evolve, organizations have no option but to quickly adapt to the changing landscape to ensure that their operations remain flexible, agile, and uninterrupted. One of the major trends today is the rise of the contingent workforce, a temporary work arrangement that is slowly becoming the norm in many global businesses. From small-scale businesses hiring temp workers to address talent shortage to multinational corporations such as Amazon, Walmart, tapping contingent workers to meet seasonal demand. There is no doubt that the need for temporary workers has been on the rise lately. A 2019 study by The Economist found that among more than 200 executive decision makers surveyed in the US and the UK, more than 60% expected to rise in demand for the contingent workforce through 2024. The report also found that the contingent workers accounted for more than a fifth of the total workforce of nearly 60% of the respondents, underscoring the growing demand for this type of working arrangement. The role of contingent or gig workers became even more significant in the wake of the pandemic. As most people were forced to stay home, contractual app-based delivery riders became the society backbone to address the need for delivering essentials. But aside from demand, technology has also played a role in the rise of the so-called gig economy, with several technology platforms enabling individuals to offer their skills to the public. Companies are given more options to hire temporary workers regardless of geographical constraints. As a result, today's conversation has shifted from how businesses can benefit from hiring gig or contingent workers to what kind of contingent workers does a business need to hire. In this article, we will discuss the classifications of contingent workers, their advantages and disadvantages, and the best practice to integrate them into a company's operations. What is a contingent workforce? A contingent workforce refers to workers hired by a business or an organization on a demand basis, also called alternative work arrangement. Contingent labor taps an individual to work on a temporary setup or under a contract agreement. As the name implies, contingent workers' employment is dependent on the organization's business needs. Unlike regular salaried employees, contingent workers are not entitled to paid time off, healthcare, or other governmental benefits, so they are not officially part of the company's payroll. While contingent workers share a common denominator that is working on an ad hoc basis, they also come in different classifications, depending on how they are sourced, paid, and other factors. Now, let's discuss about the types of the contingent workforce. One of them are consultants, often working in niche industries. Consultants are knowledge-based experts who provide advice and guidance to a business in line with their area of competence. Some examples of specialized industries that require a consultant are copyright, intellectual property people, marketing and strategy, business development. So consultants have certain level of independence when reporting to a company and not in charge of executing their recommendations. Another type of contingent workforce is temporary employees. Temp workers are outsourced by a company through a staffing agency. They work on a short-term assignments such as per task and fixed-term projects. Temp employees are ideal when you need to fill gaps in your operations without having to spend on taxes and mandatory benefits. Companies that need to address seasonal demand or fill in the roles of employees who are on a temporary leave are some scenarios where hiring temporary workers is recommended. Another type is part-time employees. While some part employees are entitled to certain benefits, they are still considered part of the contingent workforce because they work outside a company's traditional structure. On average, a part-time employee works fewer than 35 hours per week. College interns. Interns may report on a full or part-time basis, but their work is only limited to a certain period of time. Their objective is to obtain on-the-job training, often as part of the university requirement. They may be compensated or not, depending on company policies. In some cases, well-performing interns get absorbed into a permanent role. Independent contractors. Gig workers and freelancers who are not represented by an agency are generally categorized as independent contractors. As self-employed workers, they manage their tax contribution and other obligation while offering their services to the public. Independent contractors may work on per-hour basis based on the milestone per project, depending on the agreement with the client. The advantages of the contingent workforce. With the right planning and strategy, hiring a contingent workforce can bring a wealth of opportunities to the company. Here are the key benefits you can get from having temporary workers. Number one, flexibility. Hiring workers on contingent basis gives you the flexibility to bring in staff only during peak seasons and then let them go when the demand decreases. This flexible setup enables you to tap a labor pool depending on your business needs without being tied to regulatory requirements. Since contingent workers report on ad hoc basis, you can easily terminate an individual's contract once the job requirement is met. E-commerce giant Amazon, for example, hired 175,000 temporary workers during the pandemic as people became reliant on technology to get their essentials. Another key benefit of a contingent workforce is cost efficiency. Companies can save on administration expenses related to recruiting, onboarding, and training regular employees. Hiring contingent workers also makes financial sense regardless of the size of your company, as you no longer have to pay for employment benefits such as healthcare, insurance, taxes, paid time off, and pension contribution. In The Economist survey tackling the gig economy, respondents identified cost saving as their number one motivation when hiring temporary workers, followed by agility and project-specific needs. Fresh perspective. As a business leader, your goal is to make sure that all systems are optimized to grow the company. But even though you know your organization like the back of your hand, you still need a fresh set of eyes to bring in new perspectives and recommend changes that could improve your processes. In some cases, being too close to daily operation makes it hard for a business leader to recognize loopholes and areas for improvement. This is where hiring a consultant or an advisor becomes an attractive option. Consultants are niche experts who can offer an objective perspective as they do not have close ties with the personnel nor the company itself. Greater access to specialized skills. Many contingent workers offer specialized skills that are hard to find elsewhere. Businesses, especially SMEs, can make the most out of contingent workforce management by filling in talent shortage without being tied to long-term regulatory requirements. If you have a short-term project that requires expertise, getting a contingent worker who specializes in the required field is the most efficient solution. Efficient training. Contingent workers are already experts in their respective fields. They have specialized skills that they have acquired through years of experience. Unlike with hiring permanent employees, contingent workers require far less training to get the job done. The other benefit is low risk. Having a contingent workforce lets you benefit from a temporary worker's highly specialized skills only when you need them. Think, for example, how the pandemic has forced many companies to lay off employees and pay hefty sums for their severance packages. But if you are working on a per project basis, you no longer have to submit to these regulatory requirements. You can also experience less red tape when hiring contingent workers who are often ready to work at a short notice. All you have to do is negotiate the price, set the terms, and get them ready to start working. Now, let's talk about the disadvantages of the contingent workforce. Every business decision comes with risks, and implementing contingent workforce management is no stranger to that. Here are the common disadvantages that you could encounter when hiring contingent workers. Compliance issues. Compliance issues when it comes to contingent workforce management largely relate to workers' misclassification. This happens when a company labels a worker as an independent contractor rather than an employee to avoid taxes and other benefits. In extreme cases, failure to comply with regulations can lead to hefty fines or legal action sometimes. When hiring temp staff, you have to make sure that you are compliant with your state and federal laws. Now, let's talk about recruiting and screening. In most cases, screening contingent workers is far less strenuous than regular employees. There could be also cases where you can identify fraud and false information. Hiring gaps like these may be risky, especially when the temp worker has access to company assets and intellectual property rights. Another disadvantage is lack of control. Is an advantage that you have to consider of employing contingent workers is that you can only tell them what tasks they need to do, but you are not allowed to tell them how to do it. By nature, these types of workers or freelancers operate independently, giving management far less oversight and control over how the contractor accomplishes their tasks. This is prevalent among independent contractors who are used to working during their desired hours. As part of control issues, poor communication can also arise when dealing with contingent workers. Building company culture, another disadvantage. Businesses that are relying on independent workers on a large scale may struggle with building their company culture. This may have a ripple effect when you have to create camaraderie among your employees. Having a weak company culture can also impact your branding, which is essential if you are competing for high-skilled talents. So, how to find contingent workforce? There are many ways to find your contingent work staff, and this largely depends on your company's existing recruiting practices. If you have a well-established human resource department, you can facilitate the sourcing, onboarding, and training in-house. Another option is to use an external party such as a staffing agency who can source contingent workers based on your business requirements. You can also rely on technology-based platforms when looking for contingent workers. Upwork, Freelancer, and Crowdstaffing are just some platforms where you can source independent contractors. These platforms have on-site features that allow you to communicate with the contractors, facilitate the invoicing, and track work progress. In other cases, you can use referrals when looking for contingent workers. This is ideal when you want to find advisors or consultants who specialize in niche fields, best practices in building and managing contingent workforce. While contingent workforce management comes with risks and challenges, it should not mean that you should totally scrap the idea of adopting contingent workforce solutions. Here are some best practices that will help you build and manage your contingent workers. Standardize the procurement process. One of the best practices when building your contingent workforce is by procuring the right workers through a standardized method. To do this, evaluate your workflows and day-to-day operations to see what kind of tasks can be assigned to an external workforce. Once you have identified the gaps, coordinate with various departments that will be involved in this process. This is a great way to collaborate internally, especially among the human resources, procurement, and finance, to minimize the risks of hiring outside workers. From crafting service agreements, identifying the job description of external workers, to determining the compensation, the involved department have a full knowledge of the overall process. Having technology-based procurement system will also help you ease up the process of finding and managing outside workers. There are various tools that can assist with managing a contingent workforce, including sourcing, onboarding, tracking the process of each worker, and invoicing as well. One example is a vendor management system, a VMS, an internal-based tool designed to help businesses procure and manage staffing services. Another option is a managed service provider, an MSP, which refers to an outsourced solution operated by an outside agency that centralizes and consolidates temporary staff under a single program. So while your contingent workers are temporary, your chosen HR solution should treat them like a permanent employee to streamline the process. The other thing you should do is to train and engage the temp workers. Training is essential for a workplace to achieve its goals. This holds true even when contingent workers are involved. You should apply the same development strategies and techniques to your temp staff so they can produce the same output as your regular employees. Aside from helping to achieve your key performance indicators, focusing on your contingent workforce's training will also help you create a safe working environment. It is likewise important to conduct performance reviews to identify gaps and make space for improvement. As an added motivation, temp workers must be aware of how their responsibilities align with the company's overall targets. This can be done either through your vendor or between you and the workers depending on your agreement. You can also consider your succession planning even if your contingent workers generally operate on a temporary basis. As previously discussed, high-performing contractors have a chance to get absorbed into a full-time position, so having a succession planning process in place will help ease the transition. Comply, comply, and comply. Complying with the regulatory requirement is a complex but important part of managing a contingent workforce. This includes making sure that your workers are properly classified based on the contingent status. You should also ensure proper statutory and internal reporting to minimize the risk of lawsuits. Additionally, compliance covers the identification of KPIs to give the management a benchmark whether the temp worker or vendor is on target. Always consult with your legal department when dealing with this type of workers so you can understand all the compliance risks involved. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. In the next one, we shall discuss everything you need to know about staffing planning. Links to everything will be in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe. It will help us to produce great content for our professional audience. Let us know if there is something you would like us to discuss in our future episode. Please just click in the link in the show notes and you can submit your questions directly to me. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.